There's a really, really distinct sense of place in the film, and I wanted to ask, kind of, you were born there and grew up in Jersey, kind of why did you decide to shoot and set the story there?
Well, it kind of started from, it's loosely inspired by a true case. There was a guy called the Beast of Jersey who committed a lot of really horrific crimes in the 1960s, and I knew even he was caught in like the early 70s, and even when I grew up in the 80s, he was still a kind of like spectre that haunted the island. And I won't go into details of his crimes now, but you can research that if you're that way inclined afterwards. But he was like, yeah, he was almost like part of the folklore growing up. He was like the local bogeyman. Somehow he within like my childhood, imagination. And so I was kind of toying with that idea when I was looking for, to find a film that was set on the island, and I wanted to use it as a backdrop for some kind of crime film. And I read that he had a wife that never knew, and I became interested in. And he was quite a functional member of the community. He had children, and it was, I dug into that story, and I tried to. I also needed to bridge the gap of I needed to personalize it in some ways. So I went back to my childhood impressions of the island and how I felt like it was a fairy tale-like place. It's very quaint, and despite portrayal in the movie, it's quite a safe place, and it's quite it's not always like that. It was really idyllic, and it was beautiful, but I also had this feeling when I became a teenager of feeling quite suffocated there, and it didn't have it. As soon as I got into things like cinema and music and art and books, it didn't really have that. It's not like it's a small island. It's not like it has a really vibrant cultural life, and so I really wanted to get out, and I thought that was interesting to maybe look at how a place can seem quite paradisical, but also you can feel trapped by it, and you can be imprisoned by it, and and I just had so much, we all have it, I guess, with the places that we grew up. You got so much feeling about the landscape, and I knew I just wanted to I thought it would be a very unique canvas to set this love story, this kind of this quite passionate love story that's trapped in a kind of nightmarish scenario. I thought it would serve both of those things in a way.
It's interesting that you mentioned a couple of kind of keywords like fairy tale and crime and thriller, because one of the things that I really loved about the film is how it plays around with genre conventions. It's a romance, and it's a thriller, and sort of a serial killer thriller. There's kind of tints of erotic thrillers from the 90s as well. Kind of how did you approach both kind of playing around with so many references and so many genre twists?
Some ways, genre was a dirty word for me at film school. I was really on the art house and spectrum when it came to what I would watch on the weekend. I got out the DVD of Satan Tango quite a lot. I was that guy who was and it was only when I came out of film school and I became more at ease and accustomed to the idea of using genre. And I rewatched a lot of 70s films, which is American cinema in the 70s. I'm sure it's the reason why maybe a lot of us got into cinema, and like Chinatown and Rosemary's Baby and Don't Look Now and Conversation. I just love those movies, and I was watching them a lot, and I realized, these are elevated genre films. They were working within different genres, and they still had very rich and deep characters and still had really complex themes. And I thought, there is a way you can use genre as a Trojan horse to smuggle in complicated ideas, and it's a way to sort of seduce an audience and into the cinema, and you can also you can create quite a seductive film world, and it allows you sometimes to maybe go to a more challenging place. And so, but then when you do that, I was just very conscious of you can't just embrace a whole genre. It's a relationship you have with tweaking it and circumventing it and delivering on some things and subverting other things. I wouldn't say it's a game, but it's just I was very cognizant of not wanting to fall into the tropes. So the trope of this kind of genre is that you usually follow the detective or the psychopath. And I was like, well, maybe if we got this character who's on the periphery, we just focus on them. That changes it. Usually you have very sensational murders of innocent young women. I was like, okay, well maybe we just don't have that. Do we need another film to to show those scenes? And maybe we just start on the sites of where those victims died and the shrines that are there, and it's one way to go, this is a different movie. And sometimes it was embracing some of the tropes, like the interrogation scene, but instead of like the 50-something-year-old guy smoking a cigar, the detective is going to like interrogate her. Maybe it was going to be more would embrace the fairy tale idea. This is the wise woman, the crow, that was trying to warn the heroine not to go deeper into the forest. And it can be more of a sort of psychological investigation as opposed to about evidence. And so a lot of it came, and it was just a lot rooted by character as well. And I just thought, as long as it's rooted in the character, and that feels truthful. Maybe we're allowed to jump around genres a bit, and the audience will go with us as long as that connection feels quite strong emotionally.
Because at the heart of the film, it really is this kind of electrifying romance between Moll and Pascal. So when did you, Johnny, and Jessie, when did you get involved in the film, and how did you know like the chemistry was just right?
I came on about 3 months before we started shooting.
Even longer.
Or maybe
6
longer.
months.
6 months
Yeah.
before we started shooting. And went through the usual process of auditioning. Fought for it because I really loved it, and it felt really fresh, and I just had a really strong connection to her, and was kind of scared and thrilled and enlivened by her, and she goes on such a journey. I felt I kind of could understand her and empathize with her, but also grow from her. And then we met at a chemistry read before we started filming, and then I don't know, we kind of like each other. kind of. And we just had a great friendship and trust, and we both work quite similarly, so it felt really organic and natural, and
for me, coming into the room and meeting Michael and I met them both for the first time on the same day when I came. I was brought in for this read, and Jessie was sort of cast already, and then it was about, I think they were looking for Pascal, and I came in, and it's quite rare to walk into. I think I had a long chat with you before Jessie turned up, and I was like, bloody hell, we're gonna talk all day, because you're really into, you're really invested in this journey that you've gone on with the story, and I just loved that. I fell in love with Michael's vision for it. I was just like, the passion and the depth of his understanding for the story that he was telling was really, just really beautiful, I thought, and like really rare, and then Jessie came in, and it was like, for me, just like the perfect combination of great souls and and creativity and energy and passion, and I just desperately wanted to be part of it. So.
And Jessie, Moll has this kind of great slow burn reveal of all of the unpeeling of the layers of her personality and her emotions. How did you kind of build in that slow kind of reveal of all of her intentions and her personality into your performance?
Well, it was something which we spoke about quite a lot before we started shooting, and in prep it was something, dripping in her world into my head somewhere before we started shooting, so that when we got to shoot I could just play, and we went to Jersey and before we started shooting, and kind of understanding the context of this world and what it meant to exist in this kind of oppressive place where the walls were coming in, and really I used like lots of music to kind of shift dynamically kind of things in different scenes, but really it was what was happening between us all in a moment, and we would all come in the day and figure out what was potential in the scene, and then, you know, have a kind of freedom to kind of find it there and then. It was nothing pre-considered too much that it felt.
So
Because you know, the characters are very feral and raw, so if it was anything too controlled, it would have felt inauthentic to what these characters were, how they were living in their life.
So what was the atmosphere like on set for, you know, all of you? Like, were you really, really faithful to the characters as they were in your script, or were you kind of, you know, improvising a lot and bringing a lot of new ideas on the set?
I don't know if it was like, I wasn't like improvising dialogue. It was like, it was about, but it was very, yeah, they were, because both these guys like to sculpt the performance on set, and I quite like, I kind of said, like, it's great if the set is a creative space. It's not just about executing a really specific preconceived idea. Like, we had a short amount of time in rehearsals, but it's not like we went through the whole script. It was more like flushing out ideas, and so that we could have a conversation about what does this mean and why this, and we can interrogate the script a bit. And I gave both of the guys a biography of each of their characters, and they came back with more thoughts, and we were sharing books and films, and it was like we were sort of tuning into each other's frequencies, so that when you're on, because it's just too hard when you're shooting a low budget film to be on set and, you know, to have protracted conversations about why the character is in that situation, because you could have had that conversation beforehand. You want to like maximize your time to like play and like, oh, maybe this way, or what about this, finding extra nuances and extra layers. And then inevitably, if there's like, I'm not protective over the dialogue, if there's a more natural way to say something or something comes out that is it's just sometimes we'll just respond to that, but it was just keeping it kind of loose enough that we could still find new ideas. And then there were a few moments that were like more improvised when they move in together. Because it's quite, we wanted it to feel quite impressionistic, like, is this happening over a day or a week, and just to capture that feeling of a first love and just that excitement, and you know what it's like to for those characters. I wasn't that specific. I was just like, oh, you know, maybe they wrestle in the lounge or they chop wood, and you know, it wasn't like super detailed. And then we could just have like an hour to shoot that, and and we would be more following the characters. And then of course other times in some of the heavier longer dialogue scenes, it was like more specific. But still, you know, the guys were so good at like just always. It was never really two takes were the same. It was always like, we should be finding something else each time.
And it's interesting because both Moll and Pascal are kind of the misfits of their town. And can you talk a little bit, all of you actually, about how you saw your characters interacting with the rest of the community, you know, with the people who were rejecting them or kind of looking down on them?
You go.
I mean, so, you know, with Pascal, I mean, Michael and I talked about this a bit, but with him, you don't see the people in his life. You know, you don't learn anything about his past that you think might be concrete truth ever really. I mean, you hear what the policeman gives to Moll about his prior convictions and things like that, but even that's like through the filter of somebody who's a jealous, you know, party in that. And so, you know, we developed like a story, but it was always clear to me that it was important I had something in my head, you know, but that he was kind of wide open to the audience, that he's unknowable in some sense, and that, you know, he's playing the truth of what's apparent to him in each scene, but actually his nature is that he's mercurial and he can change, and something that's true to him in 1 minute might be different the next. And so that was something. It was like a private truth that I had in terms of what had happened to him. But you know, him and Moll both have this thing of being ostracized, and he has a past that he's trying to overcome, and potentially a much darker secret that he's wrestling with maybe not, maybe it wasn't him. So all of that, and they see in each other that a kind of kindred spirit, and I think he's surprised by Moll. I think he's surprised by what he finds with her. I think it could have gone a different way. It was moment by moment, and I think Michael's sort of environment that he created allowed a sense of play and a kind of delicate discovery in each of those scenes that really served the story in terms of the potential for where it could go. I don't think the characters know which way it's going to go at any moment, and I think that's really important in terms of the freshness of it.
The broad approach that I had with my cinematographer, in fact all my heads of department, is that we wanted it to feel timeless, like it wasn't going to be set sort of in 2017 and we were going to feature mobile phones, and that we wanted it to have like a kind of timeless fable like quality, and also that it was we wanted it to be what was the term that Ben came, enchanting, almost like a fairy tale, and for it to feel quite vivid and lush, and for it to not be, I suppose films about the subject matter could be quite cold and austere, almost made as if from the point of view of a detective. Like my favourite examples of them, even, Zodiac or something, they're so precise and measured, and we just wanted to make it more of a hyper-subjective aesthetic. So you're experiencing the film within the skin of the character, and you should, every aspect, the music should come from the guts of the character. It should be the feelings that are gnawing away at her deep down. The sounds can tap into the constant anxiety maybe she feels, and so they can be quite oppressive, and then broadly we had this approach where when she's with the family and she's trapped within the community, we'd be very considered with the framing, and we'd use slow zooms and slow tracks, and the editing would be more deliberate. And then when she's with Pascal, it was more handheld, and would be set outdoors more, we'd use more natural light, and it was more of an organic feeling, and the editing became impressionistic, like when they move in together and would break continuity. So they were like our broad approaches, and then you make up all these rules when you're shooting, and then you break your own rules if you like it just feels right the other way. But it took 7 years. I'll try and give the really short version. The first bit just always scares a lot of young filmmakers off. They're like, because I thought I'd come out of film school and make something within 2 years. I was doing other things at the same time. I wasn't just working on that. I was doing shorts and not. I developed it through a script development lab called the Trino Film Lab, and that took me from a paragraph to a treatment, and then I got selected for the next year, and that took me to a first draft of the script. I got some producers on board, and we developed it, another few drafts, and then we took it to the BFI. And in that time, I'd made a short with the BFI, and it was, they were happy, I guess, about how that went, and so they were quite open to it, and they came on board, and they had notes, and they have a lot of feedback, which I'm quite masochistic in the writing stage. I want feedback and I want notes because that's my first audience, and I'm just very curious about how it's reading, and I just can't write from the inside point of view of a character, and I struggle to get the objectivity of I need someone else to help me get that perspective, and it helps me calibrate, that's how that reads, that wasn't the intention, I need to shift it this way. And then after a draft or two of that, we got Film 4 on board. But both of these things were long conversations, like courtships, to get the funders on board, and chats, and that's interesting. What about this? And come in next month. And, cool. Okay. And so it's a bit of a dance, but when because there's a big queue outside their door of filmmakers that want to, and they've got a certain pot of money, and they've got to make sure that they're they're really behind it. So they really interrogated the project, and then when they're on board, they're so supportive. And it was all the way through, up until the edit. They want the strongest version of the film. The great thing about working with those funders is that there's no imperative of it, having to be cynically made just for a box office. Or they want the most interesting, creative version of the film, and will push you in that direction. So, yeah, and then of course you have this whole build-up which takes so many years, and then the execution is really short. We shot the film in like 5 weeks, and we had 4 weeks in London, 1 week in Jersey, and then sometimes of course you're spending months working on a scene, and you've got half an hour to shoot it, and that is it felt like a baptism by fire in terms of just how tough that was. And you think you come out of making your first feature and you feel like, oh, I've definitely had it the hardest, and you show your battle wounds to like other directors, and of course they've a lot of people have had it tougher than you. You're like, oh, someone else's, the whole crew got malaria. I suppose my crew didn't. It wasn't that bad. We were shooting in Jersey, and the weather was good to us. So, and then it was like a 5-month edit, and that's 7 years. Protagonist was our sales agent, which was great because we thought that we'd be able to like package the film for the market. This was all new stuff, and it still is to me, how something gets sold and all of that. But the plan was to premiere it and not show it to anyone at a major festival, and then hope that someone wanted to buy it. We showed it at Toronto, and so I found that I had so much. I've told people before that I really feel like they should hand out Valium to first-time directors at festivals, because you're going there, exposing your film to, thousands of people for the first time. No one's seen it outside the silo of, you and the producers and a few friends. You don't know whether the audience is going to react well. Everyone's reviewed it, but there's an embargo on reviews until the credits go up. So you're watching the film with 1,000 people through your fingers, and then the credits go up, and you can see your producers go online to look at the reviews. You're like, oh my God, what are they saying? It's a 1-star film, isn't it? And then you do a Q&A, and then and you just try and enjoy the evening, and then the next day you do or you don't have offers in for someone to buy it. So that's all like terribly exciting and frightening. And then luckily Toronto was really kind to us. The reviews were pretty positive, and the audience really reacted to the film in a good way. Someone has told me since, though, that Toronto audiences are so kind, you should take off 10% from what they felt. And I thought, why are you telling me that now? I just had a really, it's just 10%, just shave that. So that was our journey, and then there it sold to the UK and the US and a few other territories. The ending changed, a lot through the script had so many different versions. One version was more of a austere art house, like pure character piece, and I just felt it wasn't seductive in the way that I was thinking about being a filmmaker. And another version became more genre, and it just didn't have the levels of complexity, and I kind of continued to excavate the characters, and they changed the journey of the script. And that's generally my process, is to like write a story out with kind of archetypes, then I dig into the characters, and frustratingly they want to do something different than the journey I've set out for them, and they go in that direction. I have to like rewrite for them, and then the ending did have it changed quite a few times. I had a thing at some point. There was an idea that maybe it should end after the cafe scene, and I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a bit of a kick in the stomach to an audience who just invested in this young woman who's in a certain status, and then at the end she. But that's fine. But it was more. I sometimes have a trouble with like very oblique art house ending. I can find it as much a trope as certain genre conventions, and I miss sometimes the third act in some movies, and it's a fairy tale. This needed to be climactic. She has to slay the dragon, and it had to exist on that sort of. That was that fairy tales were the tectonic plates that I was building the story from, so it needed to be quite grand in that way. And there was a bit more information in the cafe scene and that final scene that we shot, and we took a bit of that out in the edit, because we thought if we're given this moment of climax, maybe there's a way to take out a bit of information and allow more room for interpretation about motives. Is she the avenging angel? Is she doing this for revenge? Is this a way for her to do it because she's atoning for the crime that she committed in her youth? And if she saves the community now, even the one that oppressed her, she somehow atones for that. Is it just an affirmation that she is like him and he's right? Is she the beast and this is the seventh murder. I don't know, a lot of interesting interpretations came out. And I've heard very compelling arguments for ideas that I've never intended or thought about, that I'm almost convinced are more true than what my intention is. So it was, I felt that was one way that it could sort of open up possibilities so it changed it, in that way. All the way through, I guess, like, it was really, in the shooting is when the characters came alive in a really full way, because I was working. I realised, in some way, it pretends to be these things, but it's a character-focused film. It's masquerading as a genre film, but it doesn't really, it's on these guys' shoulders. And so when we were shooting, sometimes me and the DP had a more elaborate plan about how we were going to capture something, and we just didn't have the time often. Something, goes wrong. There's always sort of surprises every day on a shoot. I had a note that I wrote down a quote by Herzog that said, "Be prepared because every shoot day involves a sucker punch," or something. And I just thought, oh God, is it going to be that hard? It's true, like they do, and it's like it's really, there's always a surprise, and I would always rather sacrifice that elaborate shooting plan if it meant that we could explore something in performance, so it became quite grounded in performance in the shoot, and then in the edit, because through music and sound design, we kind of brought in this other visceral, I wouldn't even call it like genre, but just like a very, like visceral sound design and those qualities. So maybe my focus in the shoot though was with these guys. A big part, because I knew Johnny from a few performances and was, to be honest, I don't know if I've told you this before. I couldn't quite see him in the part I was like, Johnny Flynn. I just couldn't. I hadn't seen those roles. And my casting director, Julie Harkin, who also was the one that sort of discovered Jessie and cast her in War and Peace, has a much better intuition than I do about what actors can or can't do. And she said, "Okay, I'm going to get you a ticket to go and see Hangman. Go and watch that and tell me what you think." And then for those that haven't seen it, Johnny plays, I don't want to label him, but I suppose a kind of sociopath.
Fair enough, yeah.
But very charismatic one. And I came out of that originally I had in mind someone that was going to be very, like, physically sort of dominant and very, like a kind of Matthias Schoenhardt type character. And not to say that Johnny doesn't, like, he works out. He's like, I
did when you asked me.
But I came out the Hangman thing, and I realised what's most interesting. I was so stunned by the performance, and I thought what was so interesting about Johnny as an actor is that he's chameleon. He can be a shapeshifter, and this is what is interesting about Pascal, is that he can be charismatic. He's playing the romantic lead. He's also playing the potential antagonist in the film, and he's sometimes like a big cat stalking his prey, and he's sometimes he's quite vulnerable and he's wounded. And I just thought that was more important than someone with like big guns, at the end of the day. And and Johnny has both, so that was the. But it was a really significant like moment of just like, whoa! When you see a whole new dimension to an actor.
Thanks.
Well, I don't think there was any like conclusive decision. It was a question that I was trying to figure out as well. The character was trying to figure out about, this is a man who's brought her back to life from being numb. And her love for him is so deep and true that the question that a man who could bring her back to life could potentially kill somebody is something which is her conflict in a way. And I suppose it was maybe once he strangles me.
Red flag.
Which is, red flag alert. But I think really, even from the moment that she sees the dead animals in the back of his car, there's something dangerous about this man, which at the beginning entices her, and in the end is something that she has to kill, whether that's to protect her community or because she's got infected with the seed of beastliness. I think what drew me in was actually that the aspects that we try to hide, those ugly aspects that we as human beings in society try to hide because morally we're told what it is to be a functioning human in the world. And I suppose what excited me was the fact that this was a platform and a story which was allowing those shameful shadows inside to be put on the that are inside to be put out on the outside, and to kind of question what morality actually means, and that the kind of foibles of human mind and nature is it's complex. And I suppose when I read Moll first, I felt an empathy, but also I felt scared of her. I felt scared for her. I felt like she was hungry to escape and was looking for a way to break out and be free in some shape or form. And that wasn't going to be generic, because there was a lot of pain and aspects of herself that she was afraid of that were simmering underneath the thin layer of skin that she had on at the beginning of the film. Is that answering it?
Yeah, I find it exciting to take on characters that have something that they're wrestling with in their part. It's much more interesting than than for me at the moment, for some reason, than really sunny characters. Because I don't know, for me, I've been feeling recently like that's a chance to tackle something that's like an allegory for us as a race at the moment. It's like we're waking up to this sort of feeling that we're actually not quite as kind of perfect and God-given on this earth as we thought we were. Somehow when you watch movies in the 80s or something, the sense of purpose and the sense of entitlement that some of those films have reflect the feeling of about us as a race at the time. And I think there's a lot more questioning going on now in stories and characters that are put in those central roles in films and things, and in our kind of cultural narrative. So for me, it's really interesting to play morally ambiguous characters, because we all make decisions at moments in our lives based on what we're given at that moment, and then we have to deal with the consequences of those decisions. And these are people who have both maybe been dealt difficult hands in life, and are then they're left to run from that from the day they were born into Moll being born into her family and Pascal into his, and whatever's happened to him. And so yeah, there are really sort of shady elements to that, and I think that's what makes it a really engaging story, because you're with them, but then you're going, whoa, but maybe they did these really awful things, or maybe he did that, she did that. And you see it all, you see her go and confront the girl that she attacked when she was at school, and you see these things come up from Pascal's past, and you learn some ultimate truths about him potentially that are really dark. And it's just for me, it's just like a much more exciting challenge as an actor, and you're always trying to kind of bridge the things between you and the character, and invent the experiences that you haven't had, and cling on to the things that you have had that match your character. And there was quite a lot of invention that I had to have with Pascal, but for me that's the excitement of creating. And And I think with him, actually, ultimately, like, you know, what you potentially only learn about him at the very end of the film, he doesn't even like know about himself, you know, and that's really interesting about him. I think he keeps some of that stuff really locked down, and that's the way I had to deal with that. It's like potentially like a schizophrenic pattern of behaviour or something really layered in subconscious, and yeah, that's the way I had to think about that stuff if I was to acknowledge that it was a truth. But I think he's not acknowledging it. That's I think what makes him, if he did do those things, that's what makes him sick, you know.